you feel behind. That number in your account never looks like enough, and every time you open your phone, somebody your age is posting a new car, a designer bag, a trip you could never justify. So let me tell you what took me years to understand. The people making the most noise about money are almost never the ones who actually have it. And the quiet signs that you are already ahead of this country, you carry more of them than you think. By the end of this, you will know exactly where you stand. There is a reason that feeling is so common right now. The American economy of 2026 has split into two lanes, and the loud lane is the only one you can see. Bank of America studied its own customer data last year and found that roughly 1 in 4 households now spends more than 95% of its income on pure necessities: housing, groceries, gas, utilities, childcare, nothing left over for a vacation, let alone a brokerage account. That is a quarter of the country running on fumes underneath a feed full of proof of a life they cannot reach. Meanwhile, the actual signals of financial strength have gone almost completely invisible. Nobody films the moment a car repair clears without a credit card. Nobody screenshots an employer match. Wealth in this country turned quiet, and quiet things are easy to undercount, especially in yourself. So, we are going to rebuild the scoreboard. 8 signs, each one measured against verified numbers from the Federal Reserve, from Bankrate, from Vanguard, from Experian, from the Census Bureau. Not vibes, not guesses, real thresholds you can hold your own life against tonight. Some of these you already clear, and that is the part worth sitting with, because clearing even 2 or 3 puts you in front of tens of millions of people who look, from the outside, like they are doing far better than you. Number 1, you could cover a surprise $1,000 bill without borrowing a cent. We start here because this is the cleanest dividing line in American personal finance, and the numbers behind it are brutal. In January of 2026, Bankrate published its annual emergency savings survey. Only 30% of Americans said they would pay a $1,000 emergency expense straight from savings, not from a card they would settle later, not from a loan against next month, from money that already exists in their name. Fewer than half, 47%, said they had enough liquidity or access to funds to handle that bill at all. Sit with the shape of that for a second. 7 out of 10 adults in the wealthiest country on earth cannot absorb one blown transmission without reaching for somebody else's money. The reason this matters has almost nothing to do with the $1,000 itself. It has everything to do with what happens next. When Kendra's water heater died in February, she paid the $1,100 replacement out of savings and rebuilt the account over the following 4 months. Total cost to her, $1,100. A coworker of hers put an identical repair on a card carrying about 22% interest and paid the minimum each month. That coworker will still be paying for a water heater that broke in 2026 deep into the 2030s. Same appliance, wildly different price, because one of them owned the money and the other one rented it. That is the mechanism nobody explains properly. An emergency fund is not really about emergencies at all. What it does is stop every ordinary piece of bad luck in your life from getting marked up by 20% and stretched across a decade. So check yourself honestly. If a bill for $1,000 landed tomorrow morning, could you pay it and still cover rent? If the answer is yes, you cleared a bar that roughly 7 in 10 Americans cannot, and you almost certainly never gave yourself a single ounce of credit for it. One more layer on this. The median emergency savings balance in the U.S. News Financial Wellness Survey, published in February of 2026, came in at $5,000, cut in half from $10,000 the year before. Balances are shrinking nationally. So if yours merely held steady, you did not stand still. You gained ground while the field slid backward around you. Number 2, You have never let a credit card balance roll into the next month. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York reported Americans owing $1.25 trillion in credit card debt at the close of the first quarter of 2026. LendingTree's analysis of the same period put the average individual cardholder balance around $6,500, with the average rate on cards actually accruing interest sitting near 22%. Run that, and it stops being abstract in a hurry. A balance of $6,500 at that rate throws off roughly $120 in interest every month. Call it $1,400 a year, gone, in exchange for absolutely nothing. No product, no service, no asset. Pure rent on a decision you made months ago and probably cannot even remember making. Now turn it around. Take that same $1,400 a year and route it into a low-cost index fund earning a historically average 7%. After 20 years, you are holding roughly $63,000. After 30 years, closer to $146,000. The distance between the person who revolves and the person who clears the statement compounds into well over $100,000 across a working life, and the two of them are moving in opposite directions the entire time. According to Federal Reserve data cited in LendingTree's 2026 report, 45% of adult cardholders carried a balance for at least 1 month in the past year, nearly half the country. So if you have genuinely never carried one, you are living in the calmer half, and the other half is quietly funding the rewards program you enjoy. There is a harder edge to this as well. New York Fed data showed transitions into early credit card delinquency running near 8.5% annually through the first quarter of 2026, with elevated delinquency concentrated most heavily in the lowest income areas. Falling behind on a card has become a mainstream financial condition in this country rather than a fringe event. Staying current month after month, while nearly half the cardholders around you revolve and a growing share slip past due, is a quiet achievement that generates exactly zero applause from anybody. Malik runs every grocery trip and every tank of gas through one card, collects the points, and clears the statement in full before the due date lands. He has never paid a cent of interest in his life. The card company earns on him through the merchant instead of through his desperation, which is the correct relationship to have with a piece of plastic. If you already have it, you are further ahead than your checking balance makes you feel. Number 3, the cash you are not spending actually earns something. This one is unglamorous, and it separates people faster than almost anything else on this list. The FDIC puts the national average savings account rate at 0.38%. Meanwhile, the strongest high-yield savings accounts tracked in July of 2026 were paying in the neighborhood of 4%, with some promotional accounts running higher. Put $10,000 in each and wait 1 year. The high-yield account hands you $400. The national average account hands you $38. Same money, same risk, same federal insurance, same access. One of them simply respects your deposit and the other does not. Stretch it to 5 years and the gap widens to nearly $2,000 on that single $10,000 balance, and that is before you add another dime. The person earning $38 is not less disciplined than the person earning $400. They are equally disciplined and differently informed, which is a far more fixable problem. Here is why this belongs on a list about being secretly ahead. Moving money to a high-yield account requires no additional income, no side hustle, no risk tolerance, and no market timing. It takes about 20 minutes and a routing number, which means the people who have done it are almost never the highest earners. They are the ones who read one article, took one afternoon, and quietly started collecting 10 times the national average on the exact same dollars everybody else is holding. Rhonda moved her $14,000 house fund out of a legacy bank account, paying almost nothing, and into an insured online account. Nothing about her income changed. Her emergency fund now generates over $500 a year on its own, which covers her car insurance. That is money arriving with no labor attached to it, and she got it for filling out one form. If your savings sit somewhere that pays you real yield, you already understand something the majority of American depositors have not acted on. Number 4, your credit score sits above the national average. Experian's Consumer Credit Review found the average FICO score in the United States at 713, down 2 points, marking the first annual decline in the national average since 2013. FICO's own reading in spring of 2026 landed at 714. Both point the same direction, which is slightly downward, driven largely by the resumption of federal student loan delinquency reporting that touched more than 8 million borrowers. 70% of consumers hold a score of 670 or better. 15% now sit in the poor range, a share that grew over the year. So if your score reads 720, 740, 760, you are not merely fine. You are outperforming a national average that just fell for the first time in over a decade, during a stretch when a lot of people got quietly worse. The dollar consequence is enormous and almost invisible. Lenders reserve their best pricing for scores above 740. On a 30-year mortgage, the spread between excellent credit and merely acceptable credit routinely runs tens of thousands of dollars in total interest on the identical house. Same square footage, same neighborhood, same closing date, and one buyer pays for a second bathroom they will never see. It is worth understanding what actually drives that number, because the components carry very different weights. Payment history has the heaviest influence by a wide margin, followed by how much of your available credit you are using at any given moment. Somebody who pays on time and keeps balances low against their limits will outscore somebody with a far higher income and a maxed out card almost every time. Which is why a modest earner with steady habits routinely borrows more cheaply than a high earner who treats a credit limit as a spending target. Your score measures behavior across decades, and it has never once cared what you make. Your score is the only number on this entire list that other people are actively pricing you on while you sleep. Nobody congratulates you for it. Nothing arrives in the mail. It simply means every large transaction for the rest of your life costs you less than it costs the person standing next to you. Number 5, your net worth beats the median for your age. This is the one that reframes everything, and it is the number people get most wrong about themselves, because the wrong benchmark is the one that gets quoted everywhere. The Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances is the most thorough measure of American household wealth that exists. Its findings put the average household net worth in the United States at over $1 million. That figure is technically accurate and practically useless because a small number of extraordinarily wealthy households drag the average into the sky. The median, meaning the household sitting exactly in the middle of the entire country, is $192,900. That gap is the reason so many financially solid people feel like failures. They read a headline about the average American millionaire and quietly conclude they are losing. Now hold your own age against the real medians. For households under 35, the median net worth is $39,000. Move into the 35 to 44 bracket and it climbs to $135,600. From 45 to 54, the middle household holds $247,200. The 55 to 64 group sits at $364,500, and households aged 65 to 74 peak around 409,900. Remember that net worth means everything you own minus everything you owe. Home equity counts toward it, so do retirement accounts, and so does the paid-off car sitting in the driveway. Student loans, auto loans, and card balances all subtract. So a 31-year-old with $11,000 in a retirement account, $4,000 in savings, and no debt is sitting on $15,000 in net worth. That feels like nothing. Against the real distribution for that age, it is respectable and climbing. A 48-year-old with $260,000, mostly home equity, and a retirement balance is above the median for their entire bracket and probably assumes they are behind because a co-worker just financed a boat. Corinne is 52. She drives a 9-year-old sedan and has never taken an international vacation. Her house is 2/3 paid off, and her retirement account crossed $200,000 last spring. By net worth, she is comfortably ahead of the median American in her age group. By appearance, she reads as the least successful person at her office. That distance between how wealth looks and where wealth actually sits is the entire subject of this video. If any of this is landing, subscribe and stick around. I break down the real numbers behind American money every week, without the noise. Number 6. You capture the entire employer match every year without fail. Vanguard's How America Saves report covering data through the end of 2025, drawn from around 4.6 million participant accounts, put the average balance at $167,970. The median came in at $44,115. Fidelity's read of its own broader mix of plans landed lower, with an average of $146,400 and a median of $34,400. Notice how far apart those averages and medians sit. A relatively small group of large, long-tenured accounts is pulling the mean upward, which is exactly why so many people open their statement and feel sick. They are comparing a real balance against a distorted benchmark. Now the part that matters more than any balance. An employer match is the only guaranteed instant return available to an ordinary worker anywhere in the American financial system. A typical arrangement puts in 50 cents for every dollar you contribute, up to 6% of salary. Turn down the match, and you are declining a raise you have already been offered. Watch what that does over a career. Somebody earning $65,000 who captures a 4% match is receiving $2,600 a year from their employer. Contributed steadily for 25 years and growing at a historically average 7%, that employer money alone becomes roughly $176,000. The employer put in $65,000 of it. Time produced the rest. That is not a saving strategy. That is a second income stream you did paperwork for once, in an onboarding meeting you barely remember, possibly a decade ago. So if you contribute enough to take the full match and you have never once paused it, not during a rough year, not during a move, not during a stretch when the market looked frightening, you belong in a genuinely small group. And you should know that the balance you are staring at understates you, because contributions made in your 30s will do most of their growing long after you stop thinking about them. Number 7. You own an actual piece of the market. Gallup's polling finds 62% of Americans reporting stock ownership. Counting individual shares along with anything held inside a mutual fund or a retirement account like a 401k or an IRA. That sounds broad until the number gets broken apart by income. Among households earning $100,000 or more, 87% own stock. Among households earning under $50,000, only 28% do. College graduates land at 84%. Adults with a high school education or less come in at 42%. That divide explains more about American wealth than almost any other statistic available. When the market climbs, it climbs for the people already holding shares. Everybody else reads the same headline about a record high and experiences precisely none of it. Ownership is the difference between the economy happening for you and the economy happening around you. The barrier here is smaller than it has ever been in history. Fractional shares mean $20 buys real ownership. Broad index funds carry expense ratios low enough to be rounding errors. The obstacle was never the minimum investment. It was knowing that the door existed and being able to sleep through the years when the number goes down. Consider what ownership does across a long stretch of time. Somebody routing $300 a month into a broad index fund for 30 years at a historically average 7% finishes near $368,000, having contributed $108,000 of their own money along the way. Start that identical habit 10 years later, and the same $300 a month produces roughly $157,000 instead. A decade of hesitation cost more than $200,000, and the monthly amount never changed by a single dollar. Time did all of the work. Otis started with $60 a month into a total market index fund at 26, and he did not raise the amount for 4 years because he could not. What he did instead was never stop and never sell, including through 2 stretches when his balance dropped and every instinct told him to pull out. That behavior, more than the amount, is what put him ahead. If you own index funds, if your retirement account is invested rather than sitting in cash, if you kept contributing through a scary month, you are participating in the mechanism that actually builds American wealth. Roughly 7 in 10 households under $50,000 in income are not. Number 8, your last raise did not raise your lifestyle. The Census Bureau put median household income at $83,730 for 2024. Hold that against the pre-pandemic figure of $83,260 in 2019, and, adjusted for inflation, the typical American household is standing almost exactly where it stood half a decade ago. Household income has effectively been treading water for 5 years, which means the real variable was never the raise. It was what happened in the 90 days after it. Here is the pattern that eats most financial progress in this country. Income rises 7%. Within 3 months, a car payment appears, a bigger apartment appears, a subscription stack appears, and monthly obligations rise 8%. The paycheck grew, the margin shrank, and the person genuinely cannot explain where the money went, because the increase was absorbed before it was ever visible. Leona took a promotion worth $9,000 a year and left everything about her life exactly as it was. Same apartment, same car, same grocery routine. The entire difference routes automatically into a retirement account and a savings account on payday, before she ever sees it. Her standard of living did not improve at all. Her financial position improved permanently. That is the discipline that quietly separates people over a decade, and it is the least visible thing on this list by an enormous margin, because a person doing it looks identical to somebody who never got the raise. From the outside, there is nothing whatsoever to see. Same apartment, same car, no new anything, and not a single visible reward for the best financial decision that person made all year. What makes this work is automation rather than willpower. A raise you have to consciously decide not to spend every month for years will eventually get spent, because nobody wins that argument 365 days a year. A raise routed into a retirement account by an automatic transfer on payday never enters the argument at all. The people winning here simply reduce the number of times they have to be disciplined down to 1. Remember that quarter of American households spending over 95% of income on necessities. Some of them have no choice, and their situation is a structural problem rather than a personal failure. But a meaningful share of households spending everything they earn are doing it at income levels that would leave real margin for somebody who simply never let the lifestyle rise alongside the paycheck. If you got a raise in the last 2 years and your monthly costs did not move, you built the single engine that powers every other sign on this list. Margin is what funds emergency savings, what clears the card in full before interest touches it, and what quietly buys the index fund every month. Without it, every other sign on this list is unreachable no matter how much you earn. So count yours. Cash for $1,000 surprise. No revolving balance. Savings earning real yield. A score above the national average. Net worth beating the median for your age. The full employer match. Real ownership in the market. A lifestyle that did not swell with your income. Clear 3 of those and you are ahead of a startling share of this country. Anyone holding 5 is in genuinely rare company, whatever the car in their parking spot happens to look like. And if you somehow cleared all 8, then the only reason you ever felt behind is that the people actually ahead of you were never the ones you were watching. That feeling of being behind was never really about your finances. It came from comparing your private reality against other people's public performance. And that comparison was always going to be rigged because you were measuring your savings account against somebody else's spending. If this reframed anything for you, the next thing worth understanding is the set of money lessons schools never taught. Because almost every gap on this list traces back to something none of us were ever sat down and told. I made a full breakdown of exactly that. Before you go, I want to hear from you. And I read these. Which of the 8 did you already clear without realizing it? Which one hit a nerve? Tell me the moment you first felt genuinely ahead financially, or the moment you realized the people you were comparing yourself to were quietly drowning. If there is a sign you would add to this list from your own life, put it below, because the comment section on these videos ends up more useful than the video itself. And if you are sitting at 0 out of 8 tonight, say that too. Everybody clearing all 8 started exactly there.